In this video, I wanted to discuss the importance of white paper, white space in watercolor painting. I'll be working on these colorful leaves and painting them in a loose, abstract style. I found this photo on Unsplash and it really caught my attention with those red and green leaves, which are complementary colors. So I thought it could be an interesting challenge to try to paint those. And also I really loved the shadow on the white wall. I sometimes have trouble painting shadows, so I thought it will be good practice for me to paint that shadow with watercolor and use that medium to its advantage, use its transparency, and use colors in the shadow instead of just making it uniformly gray. If you are a subscriber of my channel, I hope you didn't miss this video. I demonstrated how I interpreted a photo that had some leaves and some interesting berries in it. I changed the colors a little bit, tried to use the photo as inspiration and not copy it. I was pretty happy with that painting, but I thought I could have saved some more white paper. I thought the lower portion could have used a few more white spaces, but I couldn't control the initial wash enough, so it is what it is. Now I want to make another attempt and paint those red and green leaves on the white wall and save as much white paper as I can while making the painting work. That is my goal for the video, and you can let me know in comments if when you see the final result at the end of the video. Tell me in comments if you think I achieved that goal or I didn't. I think the best start for a loose painting style is to start wet on wet with a really free-flowing wash that will show watercolor to its best advantage. So I'm going to spritz my paper. This is 300-pound Kilimanjaro cold press watercolor paper, and I'll let it sit for a few minutes while I figure out which colors I am going to use. It's very important not to make the initial wash muddy, and red and green are complementary colors, so there is high possibility of mud appearing on paper. Let's try a couple of mixtures. I'm going to mix Holbein's Crimson Lake with sap green, and I get pretty nice kind of brown green color, but that might be a little too warm. Let's try Crimson Lake with Cascade Green. Cascade Green has a lot more blue in it. Yeah, this is nice purple color. I am going to start with that combination. I am painting. I'm trying to even understand myself what I'm painting. I'm painting the leaves, but I am painting not separate leaves, but like a whole form together. So I'm allowing color to run and mix. I am creating some edges. You see, I'm applying it with big bold strokes, but at the same time I'm not painting defined shapes. I'm connecting all the shapes into one composition. To distribute those red leaves. This is a chance for me to use my Sennelier red. Love that color, very intense warm red. And I'm connecting my brush strokes, allowing colors to run and mix. I'm painting on a half sheet of watercolor paper. This is 15 by 22 inches. I feel that large format works better for loose watercolor painting, because there is just room for colors to mix. There is really room to use a big brush and let the colors do the magic. To drop more pigment into my brush strokes. I know I can see them before my eyes. They're drying and lightening, and I want pretty high intensity in those leaves because they're dark, especially there in the upper right corner. Okay, and I need to paint the shadow. I'm not sure how I'm going to paint this. Everything is still wet. I'm just going to put it down and see what happens. So I can paint this shadow. This is ultramarine blue that I mixed with whatever I had on my palette. It's actually a pretty nice gray color that I'm getting. Red and green neutralized by some blue create very nice shadow color. I'm going to drop it in between my leaves. I really can't follow the reference photo exactly because I can hardly understand what's going on there. It's such a tangle of leaves, but that's the beauty of it. I can just, do my own thing and hope for the best. I'm using a large goat hair brush. These brushes are excellent for this style of painting because they hold a lot of pigment and water, but they have a pointy end. So I can create pretty controlled brush strokes and I don't have to pick up the pigment every second. Okay, the right side of my painting, everything merged together. I guess it's one way to create a wash with just a bunch of brush strokes. I am going to just connect all the shapes that I painted and let the colors mix because it doesn't make any sense to try to keep them separate. I have paint running everywhere. Let's add some more pigment, some more sap green deep. I'm still trying to find those leaves that I see in the reference photo. I see them in my mishmash of colors. I think it's important to just keep the shapes connected and the colors nicely distributed. Then we can figure out what else we need to do here. Okay, this paint run can actually come in pretty handy because I can turn it into a branch. Let's add some shadows here. This one is a little too light. Maybe a little more. Maybe another leaf here. Okay, this is my initial wash. This is what I created at the first go. I'm pretty proud of myself as I managed to preserve some white holes in that wash. For some reason, it's a very hard thing to do when you're painting loose like this. Now we need to find some hard edges in this wash. But first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust the tone of the shadow. It's all the same tone, obviously, because there's only one light source, the sun, and some of it turned out darker and some of it turned out lighter. And I never realized that this will look weird, but it does. So I need to carefully add a little more pigment on the lighter portions of the shadow so it all is the same intensity. I'm not painting it with any grays. I'm only using ultramarine blue, crimson lake, and sap green and cascade green. Okay, this looks better. It looks more like a shadow. This one too needs a little more tone. Okay, I'm going to pick up, this is anthracrenoid red, and I'm going to start creating some hard edges in the painting. I'm going to kind of find some of the leaves in that initial wash that I created. Let's start at the top. I have a few that are more defined lower down, but I think they need to be distributed, so I'll start at the top here. I do not want to lose those nice variations of color that I got in some places where red kind of floats into blue and all that becomes green. So I want to preserve some of that, but I do need some hard edges because we always need a variety of edges in watercolor painting. Or in any painting with any medium, can be all monotonous. I'm using several reds that I have on the palette to create some hard edges on the leaves, to find some leaves. this dagger brush. When I bought it, I was really disappointed because it's very soft and floppy, and I thought I will never use it. But it's actually excellent tool for painting branches. It gives you either a fine line, or if you turn it on the side, you can press a little harder and create varied line. You can very easily vary the line thickness with that brush, but it's also great for fine lines. So I use this quite a bit for when planting flowers or plants or something like that. Those leaves on top are very dark and I like it. I think I need to find some leaves in that mess as well, in that wash that I created. And I'm also going to vary the greens, so using sap green, using cascade green, going a little carefully because, like I said, I don't want to mess up my initial wash and paint too much. It's very easy to add paint, but in watercolor it's hard to take it out. In that initial combination that I found, Crimson Lake with sap green and also with cascade green, I like that color, so I'm going to add it, but now I am mixing it on my palette. It's a little hard to vary those leaf forms because once you start making them bigger, they become really dull looking. So you have to vary color and tone inside each leaf so they don't look like cutouts but look like leaves. Because if you look at a leaf closely, especially in bright sunlight like this, they have a lot of variation of color and tone, and I think it's very important to capture it on paper to make them look natural. And also their edges are not straight, so I need to do something with the edges, make them a little more jagged. Down my painting and finding those leaves. Now that I'm thinking about it, the first wash that I painted, it was the faraway leaves and the shadow, and now I'm painting the leaves that are closer to us, so they have more pronounced shadows on them and they're also more defined. They have more details that we see. And this is a prime example of letting watercolor do its thing, because when I started, I had no idea. I just wanted to create a beautiful wash, but then somehow everything worked. Okay, maybe adding branches in between. Yeah, that looks good. That allows me to fill the holes and connect the forms without making heavy brush strokes and solid leaves everywhere. Maybe a little red. Down here I see something peeking through there in the reference photo. That looks good. Let's connect the red forms with some branches. And I discovered that painting the branches as a series of straight brush strokes always looks better than trying to paint a curved line. Curved line, unless you're super skilled calligrapher, never looks very good. All right, I'm going to move on to these green leaves. Find some hard edges here. Again, varying the tone because those leaves, one side is in the sun, some is in light shadow, a bit of a coarse shadow turned away from the sun. They also have veins, so they're not solid green shapes. They have so many variations going on each leaf, so I need to catch that somehow, like just hint at it without making it too pronounced and too obvious. Some more branches with the dagger brush. Give that plant a stem to ground it and to hold it all together. side where the right edge is very dark. I'm going to try this, but I don't know how that's going. No, I don't like that. It's just too dark. I'm going to pick this up. Maybe I'll just leave it the way it is and then we'll see what happens. Making those very big dark shapes just doesn't work for this painting. Okay, keep moving down. More leaves, varying my greens by different amounts of sap green and crimson lake in them. Okay, this is looking very dark, but I'll keep going for now and then I will stop and leave my painting for a little bit and evaluate what I have. I'm kind of running out of steam, getting tired, so I don't think they're going to work out, but I'll keep painting for just a little bit, just to go all the way through all the leaves, and then I'll stop and take a break and evaluate the result. Okay, I added the red leaves in the center, inventing some branches, some vines. It's using reference photo just for inspiration at this point. Maybe if I add more color here. Looking at the painting at this stage, I have it divided in two sections. I have right side painted and left side completely white. And even though I did want white, I need to connect my painting to the left side of the paper. And what I'm going to do is splatter some paint. So I'm using all the colors that I used to paint the leaves. I'm using them for splattering. This can be like texture on the wall. It gives me a chance to connect my subject to the left side of the paper, so it's not divided in the middle. I think splattering is a great technique for loose watercolor because it can give you interesting effects that you cannot achieve with a brush. And then spraying it and letting the color run, hoping for happy accidents to happen. That's the nature of painting in that style. All right, I let the painting dry. I took a break. I evaluated the result and everything looks more or less fine except those bottom leaves. I don't know what it is, but I tend to mess up the bottom of the painting on a regular basis. I don't know if it's been your experience as well or not, but for some reason it's very hard to get the bottom right. I usually have to make corrections on the bottom portion. So I'm going to re-wet these leaves and try to lift some of the pigment. I'm using a stiff scrubber brush and clean water. Of course, you need clean water for lifting pigment, not to create even bigger mess that I already created. I think one of the problems was that I started using ultramarine blue. For some reason, that mixture of crimson lake and sap green just got too dirty. Maybe my water wasn't clean enough anymore, so it just became too muddy here on the bottom and too heavy. The paint became opaque, not transparent anymore. And also I'm going to clean up that side. Everywhere where I tried to go very dark, just didn't work out. So small dark areas, but not huge dark areas, note to self. The areas that I lifted, dried, I think my mistake was making them too cold because this is where the sun hits the leaves the hardest. So I need warmer green. I'm going to mix New Gamboge with sap green deep to get very light green color and give these leaves a wash of that color and see what they look like. Yeah, this looks way better than that cold kind of muddy green that I had before. And also that surface color that I lifted creates veins on the leaves very nicely. We can plan and select a color palette, but we need to listen to the painting, what it tells us, and try to figure out what it needs to make it work. I'm going to take that light green higher up so it's distributed throughout the painting, not just in one spot. Maybe do some more splattering to connect the painting to the edge even better. Let's soften those splatters. I don't want them to all look the same. And size and shape of the brush also influences the splatters that you get as a result. I tried splattering, by the way, with that big dagger brush that I have, and they were not splatters, they were just lines that I was getting. So it's kind of interesting. That brush really, you would think, you know, splatters will look like splatters, but the shape of the brush really matters. Okay, I'm going to add some veins on the leaves. I feel I need some darker darks, so I'm going to use Crimson Lake and Anthraquinone Red to darken certain areas. And I am still not happy with the lower portion of my painting. And I see it was a mistake to use that ultramarine blue in pure form. I should have neutralized it, and I should have left white paper. This was my original intention. Let's fix that. My solution is Dr. P.H. Martin's Pen White ink. I'm going to apply it with a small brush. This is calligraphy brush. And I'm going to restore white in all those areas that I over darkened, that I tried to lift, but they didn't quite lift. So I'm going to just go back to white with white ink. I often use white gouache, but I think repainting large areas like that with gouache will look too heavy, because white gouache kind of sits on the surface, and ink really blends with paper and kind of soaks into fibers. So in this case, when I need fairly large areas repainted, white ink I think is much better medium to use than white gouache. The only thing to remember, I think, with ink is to wash your brush right after you applied it, because this is my watercolor brush, and I'm pretty sure if I let the ink dry on it, it will ruin the brush. So I'm going to go and wash it immediately after I finish painting. Those areas start looking really interesting. The ink has some transparency, and I'm also kind of dry brushing it a little bit. It looks like a shadow on the wall, on a textured wall. So you never know what you can find if you try different things. Watercolor can be discouraging, and some people try it and it doesn't work out and they kind of abandon it, but you really have to stick with it for a while if you want to get better at it, because there is no hard and fast rules on how to paint with watercolor. There are a few rules, but it's really, you have to experiment and just see what happens when you do different stuff. All right, this area looks a lot better, and I think this was actually a good example of how important white is. I should have left it white from the beginning because the painting really needed it, but I didn't know that. You know, I was in the moment, applying colors everywhere. I thought it will work out, but fortunately there are ways to go back and restore white and make it all better again. I'm going to add even more sunshine to my leaves, a little more yellow. That combination of red and green and purple was just a little too cool, so I think a little sunshine won't hurt. It also balances the upper part of my painting nicely. Let's add a few more vines to connect different elements, where on top of that white ink, by now it's dry, so I can paint on top of it. The watercolor actually goes very easily on top of the ink. It's not a problem at all. So using my small calligraphy brush to add those small details and finish up the painting. And here is the final result. And here it is next to the first one that I showed you, where I wished I left more white. Let me know in comments what you think about both, which one you prefer. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one here on Tamirab Studios channel. Help other artists to see this video by liking or sharing it. To see future videos, subscribe and click the bell button to be notified when they're published. Thanks again, and stay creative!